I'm okay with
Get the experience of being they're so dark, but they don't really feel
Do you guys want to come any closer? I mean, it's all right. We can,
I think there are 2 available seats.
You said Carol, you sat there because Mary said that, well. It really is from a very big social distancing. This is
I'm just making
very
sure we
safe.
have enough levels. We can't check it, at least we can see the levels.
Mine is also on.
Yeah. That's okay. We're very small. No worries. No, that's okay. Well, you guys are going, so it's all right. Hello, everybody. Oh my gosh. Hi. Welcome, everybody, to Behind the Scenes. As most of you know, we do these behind the scenes events before every opening night. We usually do these on a Saturday at 5 o'clock, then followed by a 6 o'clock fun dinner, followed by the show at 8 o'clock. This is all weird because there's been this pandemic, I understand, and we're opening on a Thursday night because it's a brand new work and we wanted to give it a lot more time through more previews and additional rehearsal time. So this is a Thursday afternoon. So I want to say hello to the folks watching at home because I'm sure that's what's happening. That's why we want to have. But thank you. This is a program that contextualizes the work that we do. Free to members, $10 for those who are part. How many of you who are here have seen the show already? And we can actually raise the house lights a little bit too. It is incredible. How many of you? Oh, just a couple of you guys.
Does
Great.
the workshop
Carol.
count? Does your seminar count?
Oh, the seminar? You read it.
And so I,
Great. And Carol, you came on. What's it?
Yesterday afternoon.
Oh, you came yesterday afternoon. Awesome. Wonderful. Welcome. And and how many of you are seeing it tonight? Excellent. And how many of you are thinking about whether you're going to see it based on what these two people say? Hey. We'll do a little, we're going to have a little conversation. We'll do a Q&A. We will wrap up just before 6 o'clock because we've got to turn over the stage to the folks who are getting ready to open the show this evening. So I am so happy to introduce the 2 geniuses, aka genii, behind AD 16, Cinco Paul and Bekah Brunstetter. Cinco Paul, the composer and lyricist, best known, I'm sure, to many of you as The Force with his writing partner Ken Dorio, behind the Despicable Me franchise. That was at least until the summer when Apple TV Plus's Schmigadoon took off and rocked the world. And until tonight with AD 16, the new you can read, there's a lot more about both of these folks in your programs, as well as the commemorative programs that you're getting. We're just getting to that too. So I'm short. Bekah is the book writer for AD 16. She's best known to y'all at home as for her Emmy-nominated writing on This Is Us, other television shows like Made on Netflix, but to us in the theater, we know her as one of the country's most interesting, committed, and forward-thinking playwrights. That's what they wrote to you here. No, I wrote that. It is true. Well, welcome to both of you. This is obviously going to be a very casual chat. So it was 4 years ago, 2018, which is actually when I only saw 30 minutes from the first act of the show in a showcase in New York, and it is hard to believe we're here tonight. I remember laughing so hard, I was crying. But I also felt something soul-stirring. It wasn't obvious until I got to know the show much better that I realized what it was. That 30 minutes was already the culmination of several years of work. It began with your idea, Cinco, to look at these unrecorded years of Jesus' life, but the decision to put a woman Mary at the center is what brought Bekah aboard. Now, I don't want to sort of go in too much into all of that conversation because you can watch video interviews all about this on our website, www.onlytheater.org. But I'm just going to dive in first. How would either of you explain the story of this musical to somebody who hasn't seen it? Somebody from Mars. Doesn't have to be from Mars, it could be from anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, if it's somebody from Mars, they don't know the Bible at all. So I would maybe introduce.
It's a very old book.
Yeah. I would say it's about teenage Mary Magdalene falling in love with the boy next door, who happens to be teenage Jesus, and then learning a broader lesson about what love really means. That's how I'd sum it up. Is that
Good summary.
I
You
mean,
must work in Hollywood. You don't. You realize
that's my elevator pitch.
You've got like 10 seconds to sell an idea. Is that how you would describe it?
Agreed, yes.
Agreed. Check. Why was putting a woman at the center of the story so important to you? A single story.
Well, for me, I had written a lot of things where men were at the center, and I was tired of that, and I thought there was enough of that. And my daughter's very into musical theater, and there was just a paucity of great new roles, like all these new musicals, Dear Evan Hansen, Hamilton. They all seemed to have men at the center. So that's where I was really drawing. So next time, I really want to write a show with female protagonists. But then I think Bekah also had a similar drive to a Bible story that's, instead of Jesus Christ instead of Jesus being the center.
Yeah, there's so many fascinating women in the Bible, and we kind of only know now what their contributions were, in the last 100 years or so. So that was something that instantly got me excited to work on this with Cinco. It was just focusing on Mary instead of Jesus, but at the same time having him be this really awkward, charming character. Yeah.
You were working on. You had just finished working on actually a play about Jesus about the time that Cinco approached you. So it was sort of serendipitous or fate or divine intervention.
Yes.
What was that? What was that? It was for LA Youth Theater. Am I right?
Yeah, I really, I am a 39-year-old woman who still feels like she's 13. And I really love writing about people in middle school, high school. I love those actors, I love those characters. So I think this was about 4 or 5 years ago. There was an acting school in Los Angeles that reached out to me and asked me to write some plays for their young students. And I had just written one about Jesus. I think it was Jesus inventing the chair with his dad in his carpentry shop. And also I believe it was about him and his relationship with his brother James as well. But yeah, I had just gone to see a little production of the students performing it, like the weekend before when Cinco emailed me out of the blue. So it felt very meant to be, definitely.
Thank you also, by the way, for sharing that email that Cinco
Yeah.
sent you. That's so great. In your commemorative book that we just got out, I was so amazed that email is there. I felt like a little window into your worlds.
Yeah.
So, Jesus, obviously a fairly well-known person and character. How did you navigate? You talked a little bit about finding him in those awkward teen years. How did you navigate what you figured would be expectations, creating a Jesus of your own, if you will, for this musical?
I mean, I think a lot of the discussions we had early on was how much does he know? He's 16, and we wanted to kind of play it that like a lot of 16-year-olds, certainly when I was 16, I thought I'm destined to do something great. And we thought he has this feeling, but he's not quite sure exactly what it is yet. And that's really in line with what the Bible says, that sort of he grew like bit by bit, by degrees, and he learned. And so it was sort of just trying to get into the head of you're 16 at that time, and you have this feeling you're destined to do something great, but you're just trying to figure it out. And we thought that was where sort of the fun and the charm of that character sort of was grounded.
Yeah, but it was also really important to us to protect his humbleness and his selflessness, you know, so it's not, it's a conflict in mind, because it's not like he's destined for greatness in an arrogant way, it's,
Right.
you know, like, always, even though he's kind of fumbling and figuring himself out, he knows in his heart that he's supposed to put other people before him. But at the same time, he still says the wrong thing sometimes, it doesn't have no game and all that delicious stuff.
Yeah, he really has no game, and our actor is fantastic at portraying that. So, did you feel like anxiety of influence in terms of, I mean, I'm thinking of the two biggies, Jesus Christ Superstar and Godspell, in which Jesus, or you know, which is probably how musical theater folks expect Jesus to be portrayed. Where you were like, no, everybody's gonna fall in love with this totally new idea.
Yeah, well, I didn't really feel that at
We
all.
haven't really talked about that
We
very
didn't
much
really
yet.
talk about those. I think I put in one little joke that's a reference to Jesus Christ Superstar in one of the songs, but it's such a different, you know, that's mature and it's so rooted in the Bible, but we're this vast gap in the biblical story of him. So we felt sort of a freedom to just explore. So I didn't feel that pressure at all. I just felt a pressure sort of like Bekah was saying, to be true to who he was who he eventually became in the Bible, you know, and what his core messages were, and what sort of person he would have been as he was awkwardly growing up.
What about Mary Magdalene? Second most mentioned woman in the Bible after Virgin Mary. Yet a lot of misconceptions. For those in this audience who don't really know a lot about Mary Magdalene, can you talk a little bit about what you know of her from the Bible, what you try to find in her in this production?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what we know is that she was Jesus's friend, and she was there when he died, and she was there, you know, she went to his tomb with the other women to dress his body, and the angel appeared to her to tell her and his mother and a few other women that he had risen, and to go tell the disciples that Mary was trusted with that, so she's incredibly important. But then at some point, she got, literally in history, she got confused with another woman in the Bible was a prostitute. And then suddenly she became sort of this temptress character, almost like an Eve type character, that became like a new legacy for her.
Yeah,
You know?
Beth and I have, like sometimes when we describe the project, they said, oh, how are you going to deal with the fact that she was a prostitute? It's like, she wasn't a prostitute at all. That's how we're going to deal with it, because at one point, I think one of the popes in like the 16th century, in a big sermon or speech, identified her with the woman taken in adultery. You know, the story where it's like he was without sin cast the first stone, and from that point on, they've been linked, but it's big news. It's horrible gossip, official gossip that linked her to that. But the only other thing we really know is it says that Jesus cast 7 demons out of her. And so we address that as well in the show.
Yeah, I was going to say something else. I'm trying to remember.
But very little to go on. She was
Yeah.
actually the first person he appeared to after he was resurrected as well. So that sort of gives you a sense of their relationship and how important she was to him.
Yeah, and what I've kind of taken with and run with in terms of creating her character from all that is that she's kind of a weirdo. She's kind of a little bit beyond her time, beyond her years, and she's like not really like the other girls in Nazareth and in Magdalene, where she's from, which feels to me to kind of line up with what we do know, because anybody who followed Jesus at the time was sort of going against the status quo, so that felt truthful to me.
What's with Pope Gregory? Why did he do that?
Why did you do that, Cinco?
I don't know. He probably misread his notes. And then suddenly she's identified as that throughout history.
Exactly. Could be. Which characters came easiest to you in creating? I mean, I don't know how the two of you are as writers, whether all characters come easily to you, or do some characters harder than others too?
Well, Cinco, when he reached out to me to work on this, he had written like almost like more than half of Act 1, I think.
Yeah, almost, yeah.
A lot of it. So he kind of like gave me characters to work with. Most of them were already he had already kind of started to figure out who they were. And then I
I
think,
need lots of help.
but I think, you know, we've been lucky to work on this with some really good actors over the years, and there's certainly been some of the characters we've been working with the same actors, and, you know, you start to pick up on the human being playing the character, and you kind of start to shape the character around the actor, which is one of my favorite parts of making a play, is getting to do that. But I'm trying to think if there's a specific
I
one.
would say Mary came really naturally to you. And also the first couple songs I wrote were Mary songs. And it just sort of, I think that was the easiest voice to find because she's the most contemporary voice in the show. And then it was a little more complicated figuring out Jesus and then Mary's father and all the other characters.
Certainly, I would imagine Alan Green, who plays Mary's father, has been with the project for as long as I've known about the project. I'm sure that he has sort of helped to shape where Jacob has ended up as Mary's father.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you see, you know, it was scenes were written and then you see his performance and you see, oh, I didn't think of that, right? The way he read that line and then you sort of write to that, you know, as it comes to life in an actor's hands.
Through this process, what have been the biggest changes that you found through this rehearsal process? I mean, and just so that everybody knows, writing a musical is really hard. You know, you came up with the idea in 2016 or so. You've been through 3 writers' workshops, I think. Two workshops, one of which we did here. One was done in Austin at Zach Theater, which was for the whole show. There was a couple of showcases. Obviously, we've had a 6-week rehearsal process, 5 previews. In this part of the journey, what were the biggest changes that you found? Do you think?
I mean, just last week we decided that Act 1 was in the wrong order. After the first preview, the next day.
Yeah, we moved the scene. That's pretty big change.
Yeah.
It's a huge change.
And this was our first time with music and with choreography, so that's language that was missing before. So then things that you thought were funny become very unfunny. Things that felt profound or meaningful in just a reading are suddenly feeling flat once everything else kind of gets fleshed out. So it's just a lot of like tinkering, so much tinkering, right?
Yeah, a lot of tinkering.
Yeah.
Just tinkering all over.
Yeah. Changing lyrics.
Yeah, I think that like getting it in front of an audience, right, and then seeing actors work with it helps in multiple ways because you really get to know like where your laughs are, which is really helpful. And then also, like, is the audience understanding what we're doing here? You know, clarity is your friend, and so a lot of this process was how can we make this clearer to the audience? You know, what's happening and what's motivating the events. So those were, I think, what were most of the changes.
The sort of central conflict of the play that forces Mary to go from being a selfish adolescent into understanding this greater love that you're talking about revolves around her behavior with a leper colony. So was the idea of the leper colony with you from the beginning? Is that something that got developed later on?
That was from the very beginning. Yeah, I think that was one of my first ideas that, Jesus hangs out with the lepers, so Mary goes there, like hoping he'll show up. and so ultimately then, I think when I met you, the idea was there that she was going to kind of use the lepers as a way to get Jesus to like her. But I think as we developed it together, it became part of this broader message of like, who is your neighbor and how do we treat those that society casts out, and it actually became part of that broader message. I think much more than it had been in my initial like funny, jokey version of the leper colony.
That's sort of where I was going with it. Is just thinking in the course of your work on this, you know, we've gone through some pretty dark times, and we've seen a lot of ostracization, is that the word, right, amongst our communities and in this country at the time, just since you began to work on it. And so it feels like the depth and importance and profundity of the leper colony and its symbolism has become so ultra important. I wanted to also ask the pandemic pause that we had. I mean, this show was supposed to be happening exactly a year ago here at Olney. In the course of the pandemic, you had a baby.
Yes.
We were all on lockdown. Things got weird. You went and filmed Schmigadoon.
I did a TV show.
You have your own baby.
You had your own baby. Seriously, did the pandemic and what happened over the past 2 years, do you think it changed at all your attitude or your thoughts about the play, your work on it, anything like that? Or is that more for us in the audience to say? Which could very well be. You can totally deflect that back to me.
I mean, I'm very tempted to deflect it. No, I don't think it substantially changed the work or necessarily how we viewed it, because I think it is basically at heart the same story, but I do think in some ways maybe I feel it more. Like, and when the actors do certain things or sing certain songs, I get more emotional than maybe I would have otherwise. But I don't know, Becca, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that Cinco and I, like before the pandemic, were optimists and hopeful people. So
No, that's not saying that we aren't anymore.
No, we still are, but we didn't create something hopeful and optimistic because of the pandemic. You know, we're just like a couple of dorks doing that anyways. You know, so it happens to. I'm really grateful that it's like lined up with this time in the world, I guess. You know, but that was sort of what it always was.
I feel this. I feel very much the same. I keep thinking back to.
You're not a dork. I'm a dork.
I keep thinking back to Mary Zimmerman's play Metamorphoses that was supposed to open just before 9/11 happened in New York, and then it got delayed, and it opened right after 9/11. And if you ever saw Metamorphoses, it's this beautiful, lyrical, very contemporary, but magical show about Greek myths that Mary Zimmerman put together in 2001, or actually opened spring 2002. And it hit at just a moment where New Yorkers in particular, but I think all of us in the country, needed a sense of magic, of something higher, and, you know, something to get us out of thinking about anthrax and terrorism and all of the other things. And to me, I mean, I felt like we needed this musical by the time we came out of the Trump years, honestly. But I feel like it's certainly the responses I'm getting from audience members. I mean, I don't remember previews getting so many emails. I got 4 more between like 3:30 and 4:30. I was like, Jesus, everybody stop! There weren't that many of you in the audience the other night. I think people need joy. I think they need something, and that's what programming. They need hope and joy, so it's like the writing. That's how.
I love that.
We've talked, you can also see this on our website, we've talked a lot about the musical influences of the show, the R&B, 90s music, and Vogue, TLC, and so on. Let's instead ask a question that I don't think you've been asked. Dramaturgical influences. What plays or musicals or anything if you had them, or movies or television shows, were in your heads as you were working and writing this? And it's okay if the answer is no.
No, there were a couple for me. I think Hairspray for me is one that this show lines up with in several ways. It's a show that I love. I love the original movie, and I really like the musical too. And then I also thought, like, Wicked to me is a musical that works because you know what's going to happen to everybody in it, right? You're familiar with the story, and I think Becca and I maybe in the first couple meetings, we talked a bit about how this was kind of like Wicked for the Bible, right? We know what's going to happen to these characters, so let's play the fun.
Is there anything about musicals you hate that you were trying to avoid doing? That's really a question for my husband. Who's not
I
here.
freaking love musicals. musicals. So much.
Same.
You're asking the wrong person. I love everything. I mean, I don't like the musicals that have no sense of humor, which a lot of the sung-through musicals feel like that's their style. So I like my musical comedy, with a heavy dose of comedy. So.
This is no Light in Piazza.
Yeah.
Jesus in the
So I think
Piazza.
this is there's a lot of focus on comedy.
Yeah, I guess I don't like boring, forgettable songs, and I don't think we have any of those. Hopefully. My favorite thing about a musical is when you hear a song in the musical and you can't stop hearing it in your head, and you go home and you find it and you listen to it over and over and over, and all you can think about is that moment in the show. And that infectiousness, and I think that hopefully, I think there's moments like this and like that in the show.
You weren't in the bathroom at the first intermission, but this older gentleman comes in. I don't know. Yeah, I've gotten 4 requests for the soundtrack so far.
The non-existent.
The non-existent. What about you, Bekah? Would you say there's something in your writing that this feels closest to? What the writing of yours that I know, it would be hard to say. I mean, other than I think wit and integrity that just sort of is throughout.
I don't know. All of my play, I try and wrestle with complicated things in a hopeful way. So even though the things that I write about are kind of all over the place, there's still that heart. I don't know. I have this play called The Oregon Trail that takes place inside of the computer game, The Oregon Trail. So it's kind of like a period play, but it's kind of also has a father-daughter relationship in it. So maybe it's that. I love a good father-daughter story. Because my father is here and right there. But I do find it to be one of the most tender, compelling relationships. Well, any parent-child relationship, really. But that's something that I really latched onto with this. It's, the sacrifice that the parents make for their children, that the children don't always understand, And when Cinco first gave me scenes, he had written some stuff for Mary, and I was so, just really impressed by how well you wrote her. And I think it's because you have daughters, you've lived through it recently with them. So yeah, that heart of the show I think is really wonderful and something we're trying to protect.
And certainly in my experience of watching the show's development, that relationship, once you found that relationship between the workshop here and the workshop in Austin, the whole place settled. Let me ask you, what is your experience of, I want to move sort of, I want to now make you be pundits. What's your experience of faith-based work in theater or entertainment generally? There's not a lot of it.
There's not a lot of nuance.
It's very easy to take pot shots at people who are faithful or follow a particular religion. Usually they're the enemy or the villain. Which I've been guilty of. Schmigadoon, we have but we also have her husband, who is a good example of a believer. So it's not. I think a lot of people who are religious feel that in some ways the theater community or the movie and television community in general is kind of against them. I get that sort of response from a lot of people, and I don't think it's intentional necessarily, but it just is, it's an easy road to go. And if you don't know a lot of people, if your circle of friends doesn't include people of faith, then you present a two-dimensional version because that's all you know.
Yeah, exactly. It just kind of lacks nuance. The characters tend to lack nuance. But that's why I keep gravitating. Like, kind of everything I'm working on right now has some sort of faith element because I'm just obsessed with figuring out how to dramatize faith and people of faith in a way that isn't alienating. It's more inviting, I guess.
I mean, that certainly is something that is, I think, a really lovely hallmark of your work, and one of the things that speaks to me, Becca. I'm thinking of your play Cake, which was 2019, 18.
In New York?
When was it?
Oh, I wrote it like 2015.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, and it just took a while.
Yeah.
I see, yeah. So Cake was, sort of took as inspiration the eventual Supreme Court case that you all probably heard about a Colorado baker who refused to make a wedding cake for a gay couple. And I think you managed in that play, in a beautiful, remarkable way, to treat with sympathy the side of the argument, that you would expect most people in the theater business are like, oh, we'll treat them without nuance, as you say. So what's it like being a writer of faith in this industry?
Yeah.
Well, I will say, I get a question from people in my church often, like, how do you survive in Hollywood? But I've never felt any personal antagonism at all. It's like, and I've never been pushed, people haven't ever pushed against, the first Despicable Me, we have the girls praying, which was important to me, but nobody ever said, get that prayer singing out of there, we're working for Satan, we need that out. And, so, I don't think it's an openly hostile place, really, to religion. I think it's ignorance. It's mostly what it's about, and so I feel a responsibility often to sort of educate or to try to let them know, like, it's a broad spectrum of people of faith, and I don't know, Becca, I want to stop talking to you.
Stop talking. Yeah, I don't know. For me, my faith is still evolving, and I wake up every day with questions, and so I think, all I know is that I don't want there to be nothing, and that there's truth in the Bible that I can't let go of, But beyond that, there's things that I don't agree with, and what's been interesting for me is like finding myself talking about my faith in whatever covers, like writers' rooms or meetings, and sometimes people are like, "Oh, really? What's that about? What's that like?" Like I grew up on a commune in the middle of nowhere or something, But I find those moments to be kind of exciting because it means it's an opportunity for me to offer another point of view or something.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about just process. How has this process here at Olney and the process overall of 8016, how has it differed from Cinco with your last musical Bubble Boy, or Becca, you've got an upcoming musical Notebook at Chicago Shakespeare in the fall. Has this process been similar to, different from?
I mean, I think this has been much more nurturing and helpful than the experience I had with Bubble Boy, for sure, which didn't really have the opportunities that this has had, which has certainly helped this. It's so much better than Bubble Boy as a result, I think. Also, because Becca is involved as well. But yeah, I mean, you can't even really, you probably can put a price on it, but you can't put a price on the value of these workshops and having an extended rehearsal.
I can put a price on it.
Yeah, I don't want to hear a lot. But it's been incredible, and I, my experience, Becca's had much more experience in the theater world than I have, for sure, but it's just been invaluable to get this in front of audiences, even just as a table reads and things, and you don't know what you have until that happens, and it's been so valuable.
I think it's kind of been the same for the Notebook, just that it's in the sense that it's long and there's lots of different phases of development. You get together and work on it, and you go away and think about what you learned and come back to it and try and implement what you learned, and then just kind of get there. And even sitting here today on opening night, I wish we had another week because there's a lot more that I want to do. And I imagine I will never stop feeling this way because I don't know, I never feel done.
Oh, is that so?
Yes, that is so. But at a certain point, I give up, or I'm forced to give up.
Yeah. So do you do a lot of rewriting between productions of your shows? Like it opens in one place and then you get another production of it somewhere and you're like, oh, I'm gonna tinker.
I typically haven't done that because I think as much as you want to do that, you become a different human being. And if you try and fix something you wrote 2 years ago, you don't understand who you were then. So or if you try and like get back in there, you'll break it. So you have to kind of let it be flawed. And I like plays that are flawed. Like, I think perfect plays sometimes don't like go deep enough, so.
Well, I certainly hope that, I think we're all hoping that you will have an opportunity not too long to get those extra days.
Yes.
But it won't be before tonight at 8 o'clock, so sorry. Before we move on to some Q&A, if anybody has, so sort of thinking of your questions now. Stephen Brackett, how did, just remind us how director Stephen Brackett got involved. I know that he had already directed work of yours, Bekah. Did you introduce him to Cinco?
No, I think he was brought up by my agent. We have the same agency, Gersh Agency. So they mentioned him, and then I said, hey, Bekah, what do you think of Stephen Brackett? And then he had...
Saying you have 100 exclamation points.
Yeah, because he had directed the actual play that I had read that made me want to work with that guy. So we were all cosmically connected once again. So that's how that started. And then I think Steve and I got together for lunch or something and it felt right. And there we were.
So he's not here. So tell us about working with Stephen. No, I'm kidding. He isn't here, but he might be watching at home.
Yeah.
That's probably what he's doing right now, for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what he wants to do. But seriously, what has he? I mean, I've been extremely impressed. I've watched a lot of directors work with playwrights and work with new plays, and as both a producer and just in other ways. How have you felt about working with him as writer? And what has he brought that you wouldn't have gotten without him? Besides, like all the stuff, obvious stuff. But seriously, working at some point, you go from being, you run the process to he begins running the process.
He really creates like an atmosphere of joy and trust. I've never really seen a director who makes actors feel so comfortable and safe. And they all know that if anything is not working or feels weird, they can talk to him about it. And so that just kind of means that everyone is feeling really good all the time, which just makes everything really fun. And that also means that when he comes to me and says this moment isn't working, or this song isn't working, there's just this bedrock of trust, that allows you to quickly realize, quickly agree with him, because you kind of know, and because he's made many musicals happen on Broadway, which neither of us have done. So he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that there's a point where you can only take something so far, and you need someone else to push you. You can't push yourself to a certain place, and then you need someone like Stephen who steps back and sees the big picture, and then is able to push. I've been grateful so many times for pushing me. We need a song here, and it needs to be like this, and pushing me to find better lyrics or a different song or things like that, which has been really helpful. And almost every time it makes the show better. And that's, to me, that's what he's mostly brought to this. But I second everything Bekah said. It's just a wonder to watch him work.
And it makes, as I'm sure you guys both know, but I will just share, the temperature of the room, of a rehearsal room, changes based on who's running that room, and usually it's the director running the room, and it should be the director running the room. Sometimes it's not. And we have had here, I won't tell anybody when, we have had some really difficult rooms where there's just been no trust between the actors and the director, or people don't have trust in the play. And you see that on stage. Not only does the collaboration fail to produce the fruits that it should, but you also see it on stage. And for those of you that have seen the show, and I think those of you that will see it tonight, you're going to see these people are joyful performing this piece. And to me, it radiates out. They're having a great time. They believe in it. They believe in you guys. They believe in themselves as a company.
Yeah.
It makes a difference, and it makes everybody's work better. Let's take some time for any questions. And if there's anybody up in the booth who can bring up house lights a little more, that'd be great. If they're on dinner break, hope you're enjoying your dinner. That's okay. Any questions from anybody for Cinco and Bekah? And if not, we get a longer. Go ahead, Ray.
This could be a two-hour question, but for those of us not in the biz, could you cover sort of the process of what really happens during this whole journey? So what happens in the writers' workshop? What's sort of the input? What did you take in your first writers' workshop? And then what happens until the next? Because you characterize writers' workshops versus other workshops. And then even once you put it here, I'm sure the show is so much different here than what you came in with a month or so ago.
I mean, I'll try to quickly take you through the process. Like once we had a first act, we did presentations of actors reading and singing that first act in front of kind of just friends, people that we trusted their opinions of, and to sort of get an idea of what we had. And then, and Stephen directed that. And so that was from the very beginning. And so I don't know the dates of that. Maybe there's a timeline somewhere that I
There is in the program.
So then we got some feedback from that, and so based on that, then Beck and I were ready to move forward to the second act. And I think once we had written the second act, then we applied to NAMT, which is a big music festival in New York, and we got chosen, and that's when we presented 30 minutes, basically the first 30 minutes of the show. And that's where Jason came on board, and so we had various people interested, but he was the best, and we loved him the most, and that's why we're here. And then, at this point, then we got a little, up to that point, it's all our own money, right, sponsoring these things. And then we started to get some other people that were willing to put a little money to help us do some table reads. And so you do these, and in that process, you get to understand the show. The writer's retreat was a little different, which is there was no reading or anything involved. It was just, we got a whole week alone to sort of really work amongst ourselves and figure things out. And in that time, we figured out, I think we really figured out the basic structure of the show and how it should work.
Yeah. You wrote the Messiah there, I think.
I think we had the idea for the Messiah there. And then I wrote it while I was here.
We received a residency at a house up in Rhinebeck, New York. And the Rhinebeck Writers Retreat, which is a company, an organization that just gives out time to people to create musicals. So it's just the three of us living in a house together for a week.
Because we all have day jobs, especially Bekah is so busy. But we were always so busy, so Bekah and I hardly had any time together. We would have a lunch or a phone call here and there, so that was invaluable to actually have a week to sort of be together. I think we actually probably had to leave early.
I did leave early.
But we still we had that quality time together, which was so important.
Yeah. And then it's those workshops that, like the one we did here, and the one we did with the folks at Zach in Austin, which is when you add all the actors and they spend the better part of a week learning the music and rehearsing it, just so, as Cinco was saying, to see what it is that we have, what it is that they have, and then present it in front of an audience, an invited audience at the end of that week, which is what we did here and they did in Austin.
But I will say that those are really helpful because you put it in front of an audience, but you don't have any time to really play around with things because you have 29 hours in which to teach them everything. So this finally getting this rehearsal process was incredibly helpful, because finally we had a chance to play around with some things, and it was really helpful.
Thanks, great question.
Jake?
Yes, Carol.
This is more of a comment than a question, but you don't have to know about this story, but it really helps.
Charlene, sorry, you're not Carol. I don't know why I thought you were Carol. Hi, Charlene. Sorry.
It helps because you anticipate. When he walks in with a plate, you know what the story's gonna be, you know what the lines are coming next, and it makes it so enjoyable.
Yeah, I think that that is something we intend, like giving people who know and love the Bible that insider baseball feeling, that like, that excitement of, oh, he's gonna say that, isn't he? And we can't help but want to give that to an audience, but you're right, there were like, there's been some high school theater kids here, a couple of previews who have been the most wonderful audience members. And I have a feeling that some of them are just watching the girl have a crush on a boy. I kind of got that sense.
Yeah.
And I was just delighted to see them following that story,
I'm sure you're all familiar with the term, but somebody's going to say it in print somewhere. There are so many great Easter eggs in this musical. Sorry, I had to say it. Somebody had a question. Yes.
How much thought did you, I haven't seen the show yet tonight, how much thought did you give to Jesus' mother's husband, Joseph, and how he could have been a part of this teenage life and before as a role model, what he says, and how much is that part of it or not part of it, and did you discount it or play it up, and how did you research?
You're about to find out. I don't want to ruin it for you. We never really wanted to focus on his parents, only because it's Mary's story. So I think we agreed early on that we only want to spend time with Jesus through Mary's lens. I think early on I was like, please, Cinco, can there be a scene with Jesus and his dad where he's learning how to make a chair?
And there was one, and there was a song called This Chair.
Yes.
And it's really good.
But we, just for it, with musicals, you have to be so clear and so focused and so economical, because everyone's singing and dancing, and the moment that becomes old, you lose your audience quickly. So you've got to be really, really economical. And for me, I kind of realized that meant sticking with Mary. So we learned about her dad and her mother, but not so much about Jesus's parents, right?
Yeah, although they make an appearance.
They make an appearance.
This chair is going to be a DVD extra. Are there any other? Yes.
Yeah, so what is the next step for the show?
Yes. What is?
Broadway, baby.
That's the dream.
That's
We
the
don't
dream.
know.
I hear there are some people coming
Yeah.
to see it, so we'll see what happens. Keep your fingers crossed for us.
Tonight? Yeah.
I don't know when.
Starting next week.
They come very surreptitiously.
Very sneaky.
Sometimes they don't even tell you.
Yeah?
No. Oh, thank you. Sorry, I can't see where. Oh, yes.
Okay, so you brought up Stephen Bracken as the director, and I'm having just seen the screen move several times, which was a bit rolling. I'm trying to put this together in my head with your comments about plays, about people's faith and nuance.
Yeah.
Because I'm sitting here thinking that play and the direction of it treats it in a complex way, but it's also very intense, So he's not here for me to directly most of the questions, but
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could speak to that at all.
I actually don't know. I actually have not seen that play or that production, so I don't know if I can speak to. I don't know.
I didn't see that production, I saw it
Yeah.
in New York. But I think that's one of the great things about Stephen is that he does a wide variety of work, you know, and I think this is very different from a lot of the things that he's done. And obviously he didn't write A Strange Loop, right? That was Michael R. Jackson. So, and from Michael's very personal story about his upbringing, and so I think that's where that came from. But it was interesting to have Stephen's input on this as someone who's not a person of faith, and I think he identifies more as agnostic. I think he's been openly saying that. So it's nice that we want this show to appeal to everybody, right? And hopefully it will. And I think Stephen played a big role in keeping us honest, so to speak, in those terms.
I would respond a little bit saying that I've seen now 4 shows that Stephen's directed. Strange Loop, of course, AD 16, of course, Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, which was a TheaterWorks USA show that had toured and ended up on Broadway, and then of course the show that sort of was his first show on Broadway, which I keep wanting to say The Big Chill, but please help me.
Be More Chill.
Be More Chill, not The Big Chill. Although I want somebody to write that musical because that's how old I am. So where you can see very clear connection through all 4 of those musicals in terms of the moment of growth for somebody from teen years to adulthood, the journey of maturation, a journey of maturation.
That's a word.
But so whether it's indeed for Michael R. Jackson's character Usher in A Strange Loop, which just played at Woolly Mammoth and is going to Broadway, for him confronting the demons of his religious upbringing, or Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief growing up to understand responsibility through this rather magical, mystical, mythical world. I think he's amazing. I'm sure he's amazing at a lot of other things too. But long day's journey into night you can do it. Sorry, there was another question? Yes.
First off, I want to say thank you. I'm from a local faith community here in Albany at Odell Church.
Oh.
And we got an invitation by City Hall, and we thank you for that. We're very curious as to what this was all about. Before we recommended everybody,
of course.
and a great opportunity for conversation. This is really just wonderful. Is this for all ages? I mean, is this for family where we go over the heads of smaller children and people brought their families? Is it more high school and up?
We've been, I can speak, there's actually parental guidance on our website if you want to take a look at it. We say that this is rated, we rate this as PG if it were a movie, not PG-13, but PG. So, and we're recommending it absolutely for kids 12 and up, and under 12 if you think they, depending on what you think for your kid.
There have been some 8 and 9-year-olds in the audiences that have been very entertaining. This made us really happy. But yeah, she's crushing on a guy, so there's some romance. There's a little bit of booty shaking. But yeah, PG seems right.
Thanks for the question.
And
thank
Your violence may vary.
Thank you for being here also. I'm so glad you guys are here. That's awesome.
We have time for one last question.
It was interesting timing with the Book of Longings come out, I guess during this process of this happening with, Jesus being married, and the book was written from a very strong female standpoint. Did you all read the book? Did you all think about that as his later life and the details of what that life might have been had it happened, or if it happened?
Do you know that book?
I don't know the book.
The book
Now I want to know the book.
You want to read. You do want to read the book.
Sounds really interesting.
Sue Monk Kidd wrote the book, and it's about Jesus' life, and he does get married, and it's a woman, and it's going to be similar to the struggle of who is he, and how can you be married to Jesus?
Right.
And who is he married to, even if he's married to you?
Right.
And I was just curious if you, that
We were
book is
just
there.
joking in the lobby that there could be an 8017 and 8028, you know.
Exactly, I was
So there
thinking
might
of that.
be another
And then
chapter where
the
he's
year
a
before-
newlywed, you know.
You could do this forever.
Wow, yeah, you can pretty much get 15 more sequels out of this
Yes.
before you run into.
Right, well, we'd stop at 8029.
We're gonna run out of Bible jokes, I think.
Yeah.
It's a long book, but.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, anybody watching at home, for joining us as well. We look forward to seeing you all, many of you tonight at 8 o'clock. Always email me, jason@onlytheater.org, if you have questions that I can answer. Thanks for being here.